Thank you for being here. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. The first thing that I would ask that you would do is review the agenda and let me know if you have any changes, concerns, questions.
Madam Chairman, one thing I would like to suggest we might consider is several people have mentioned to me, did y'all just ignore the 2-year term for mayor after Mayor Stanley himself brought that up, and the people watching have said, you know, y'all kind of just skipped over that, and if he wants it that way, maybe the committee ought to recommend it that way. So I'd like to put that in for discussion under terms.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other additions? No? Okay, if not, I'll accept the motion to approve to adopt the agenda with the additional item of the 2-year term for mayor. Do I have a second? All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Stampson. All right, we will move on here. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Stephanie for public comment.
Okay, thank you. Noah, would you like to give public comment tonight?
If everyone's doing well, I just had a few kind of technical things that caught my eye when reviewing some stuff that some of the draft language that was put forward. The first one is one that I'm assuming will probably already be discussed anyways, and that's that the proposed changes to the charter to implement regular charter review seem to imply that the changes to the elections also go through. So I just, like I said, I assume that would probably be brought up anyways in discussions. The other issues are probably a bit more technical, and I just would be remiss if I didn't point this out. And it's a similar issue that affects both the draft language for recall and the 8-year term limits. Both of them seem to kind of implicitly assume that there's a set end date for when the terms are. And I'll go kind of more into it for the recall because I think it's probably a bit more clear there. The draft language notes that there would be an additional requirement where you can't file a recall petition within the 6 months preceding the end of term. The issue, and I'm sure the city secretary could back me up on this, the way that the charter works is there's not a set date for the end of term for the council members. The end of the term is when their successor takes office. And so if we're going to say you can't file it within 6 months of the end of the term, well, when is that end of the term? As we saw with the last city election, Howard Smith's term lasted a couple months longer than the rest of the council because there was a runoff in that seat. And further, that can be affected by just the fact that there are differences in the schedule for certifying the election after the election actually happens, and that's especially complicated in case there's any recounts that are requested. So it's hard to know in advance, like, okay, when is that 6 months cutoff? When does that actually begin? It's a similar issue, I think, with the 8-year term limits, where, say, you're in office for those 8 years, and then the people that are running to replace you say there's a runoff in that seat. Well, it kind of creates a confusion. Do you still stay in that seat until the next person actually gets in? But that's a couple months in addition to the 8 years. I'm not exactly sure how you rectify either of these issues, but those are a couple things, just minor technical things I noticed when going through the language. The final thing, it's not actually something in any of the draft, but it's something I've heard several of the committee members mention. It's just a tiny pet peeve of mine, so if I can let my inner Sandra McCart out. I've heard it mentioned the phrase 50% plus one when referring to a majority. That's not a good definition of a majority because if you have an odd number of votes cast, then it always means that a majority is one more than you would assume the majority. So like, say there's a city council vote, and like currently we have the 5 members. If you have the definition 50% plus one, well then any vote for the council to have majority would have to be 4, because you take the 5 members, 50%, that's 2.5. Add 1, you get 3.5. In order to get at least 3.5, you need 4 people to vote for it. So that's just a little thing. It's just a little pet peeve of mine that I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up. It's not in any of the language that's been presented, but it's just something my OCD couldn't let that go unnoticed.
And I do use it.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Okay. And so I wanted to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Stephanie. Okay, thank you. I wanted to let everybody know that the assistant city manager that's here tonight is Mr. Andrew Freeman. I don't know if everybody knows Andrew, but he's filling in for Floyd for the interim city manager. So, okay, let's move on. We have a fairly short agenda tonight, but we'll see how that goes. I know. Okay, so the next thing on the list is to confirm committee consensus, and that is that's going to be item 4 on the agenda. So, have you all had an opportunity to read those items? And if there's any concerns or anything that we need to go back and discuss, please feel free to do so. So item A is the number of council members. B is terms of office. Let's see here. C is council composition. D is creation of council geographic areas for places 2, 4, and 6. E is establishing a districting commission, and F is terms of office and election cycle. G is mayor or council vacancy. H is recall. I is resign to run provision. J is city manager authority. K is term limits. L is no change to council appointing authority. M is recommend regular charter review. And Dennis, I'll refer to you for the items that Mr. Dawson mentioned.
Certainly. Some of it, I think I'll ask for Brian's comment as well, but in terms of the 8-year term limits, I think what we were referring to was 2 consecutive full terms. And so if, I think in the example that you gave, Mr. Dawson, that you have someone who's held over because of a election glitch, that would still be their full term. And so what we're trying to do is to get away from, we're trying to make it as clear as possible. And that was the intent. I hope that's there. If we need further clarification, we'll ask the attorney for that. And as far as the, the recall, the 6 months, there is an end of a term. If someone's elected in May of 2025 and it's a 4-year term, their term would expire roughly May of 2029. And so 6 months prior to that, you could not start a recall before after November of 2028. So, but the intent is, what is the normal term of office? And again, I'll ask the attorney for that, but I think the point is that we're trying to set it as close as possible to what is the normal term for a council member or for a mayor. And so that, it's really designed to prevent superfluous recalls, because you're going to have an opportunity to vote the person in or out in a short period of time. And it's really intended to say, you have 3.5 years to take a whack at the person if you want to get rid of them, but not in the last 6 months. Sorry to be graphic on that.
Would it work, Brian, possibly to say, put some verbiage in there about within 6 months of the date of the next election, when next election to the end of their term, or for their reelection, or help me here.
No, I think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
You could put something in there like that if you want.
If you want to be technically correct,
Right.
then just put in there date of the next election for which they will run for office.
Yeah, you could put that in there.
That would
That solves
cure
that.
that defect.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Remember, the definition of the term of office is in section 2.
I know.
And then we take care of all of it right
Yeah.
there. And like Mr. Dawson said, he's dead on. That's called a holdover term. That's what
Right.
that's technically called. When someone is, you have a runoff or whatever it is, that term continues on until, what does it say? Until a successor is elected and qualified.
And duly qualified.
That's right, and they're not
Sworn
qualified,
in.
there you go. And
They have
so,
to be
so the
sworn
term
in.
just extends
Yeah.
until that happens. And so, Mr. Dawson brings up a great point, that this commission definitely needs to think about. And I do think that on the recall, that takes care of it.
Yeah,
Because technically, what it's meant to do is, you're having an election.
Right.
We're having an
Get
election
rid of
right
them
now, so I
without
mean,
going
you
through all the
probably already get rid of them, or maybe
Yeah.
you're not.
Yeah.
And so, it's a scenario where, I could probably interpret this to mean that. But if you want to be real clear about it, that would be a way to be clear about it.
well, and we all know the more you put in, the more can be challenged.
That's exactly right.
So,
I was trying to save future law school students from having to read.
you've got the same problem I do. Technically.
So is it the opinion of the committee that we should adopt the clarifying language
Yes.
within the 6 months of the election?
Yeah.
Dennis, can I ask one question? Sorry, this is Toby. And maybe this is to Brian. So if we change the language, which I don't think it would matter either way, but from 8 years to 2 full terms, that means 3 of these city council members, when we do these offsetting elections, if that was to pass, they're going to be limited to 6 years, because 3 of them are going to have 2-year terms and 3 of them will have 4-year terms, correct?
I knew somebody was going to come up with that. It only exists for a short period of time, Doug.
Typically, what you would do in this situation is, you could do it a couple of different ways. The way it's laid out now, the 2-year term to get the stagger going is what I would call an abbreviated term. And I could stick that word in there. It's an abbreviated term because that's what it is. Okay, it's a shortened term, deliberately shortened to create the stagger effect. And so the way I would interpret this is it says, if you say 2 full terms, 8 years, that takes care of it. Because that means 2 4-year terms. So there's another important thing about saying 2 full terms instead of 8 consecutive years.
Right.
What happens if, for whatever reason, a council member resigns or leaves office, like I said, for whatever reason within the bounds of their term? And then council appoints someone, or you have a special election and they're elected to if 4 years passes, okay? That person would serve out that unexpired term. How does it apply to them? What if they run again and get 4 years and then run again? And then they would have to leave in the middle. The 2 full term takes care of that as well, okay? So it allows for that to occur without someone having an abbreviated term completely unwanted or involuntary, if you will, if that particular scenario was to set up. So that's why I think that's a good change.
So in that instance, even if they ran for and were elected to an abbreviated term, they could run for 2 more 4-year terms for a total of 10 years.
Right.
And still comply with the language.
That is correct.
Okay.
Because I think that's the intent of the rule.
Yeah, because this way, they would be serving their own term. Yeah, in this case, that individual would get to serve their term, because, they were filling in for someone else, but now it's their term that they're going to be serving.
Yeah, I understand.
So, Madam Chair, just so I'm straight, because we kicked this around a little bit a couple of weeks ago, or at some point we talked about this, whether we define that in terms of years or terms. And I think we started with terms, and then we bounced to years, and just saw, and I'm cool with terms. That makes more sense to me, quite frankly. Is that where we are, Madam Chair, with terms?
Yes.
So the 8 years will disappear in the language, and 2 full terms
Right.
will appear.
Is
And
the
do we
committee,
want to limit it to 4 years, or are we going to tie that one to the 4-year passage, or not?
Leave it at 2 full terms,
Yes.
because if it does not pass, that's where we got the 8 years,
Right.
was
Okay.
we were trying to anticipate if it did not pass and we stayed with 2-year terms, we still had a term limit of 8 years, whether it was 2 4-year terms or 4 2-year terms.
And that's why I wrote it with 8 years,
Right.
because I thought that was the consensus of it.
It
But
was.
if we need to
It was at the
clarify it, I
time.
think
Yeah,
it's
it was.
time to do
So we
that.
can do either or, I would think, 2 full terms of 8 years, or 4 2-year terms of the whole term to be 8 years.
Right.
I mean, the whole serving time.
There is a model in other cities where if you have someone who serves a part of a term, so let's say a council member resigns and he has 30 months remaining, he has 2 years and 6 months remaining, he has more than half the term, that person serving for 2.5 years, that would be counted as one term. If somebody serves less than a full 2 years, then that's not counted as a full term. So there is alternate language out there and other charters that address that as well. And we could make that change. I was trying to keep it simple.
Yeah, I don't think we need to get that far into the weeds. That's something, if it happens, let's ask for a ruling from legal.
yeah.
That's why God made lawyers,
Is that why?
I think.
Dean, go
I was
ahead.
just I was gonna make a comment about that, because you mentioned if that passes. Well, there's a couple of, when we do these props, there's quite a few. So voter fatigue was a question still again, but I think we're on the right track. But we still have a couple that tie to each other, and I don't know how those are gonna be worded later, but just like she was saying about, if this passes, then what is if it doesn't pass, what is a 2-year term? But you've got, number of council members versus, I don't know if districting commission, establishing a districting commission ties to that or not, but terms of office, the election cycles, term limits, all of those tie together in one prop, right?
Right.
I don't know how those are worded, but
And
just a
that's what
comment.
we were trying to do, is by putting, putting everything related to the terms of the council, the number of the council members, the composition, the term limits, everything in one, because it's all part of the same charter section. So all of that, kind of an omnibus type thing, comes in at one time. And so you're not at a risk of having countervailing things. Well, this passes and that doesn't, what do you do? It's all one package. And so that's why we designed it that way, to try and minimize those difficulties. And in talking with Brian, that was legally appropriate because it all ties to one section of the charter. And you notice the section about the city manager's appointing authority, since that's a different section of the charter, or of a specific charter section, that's why that's a standalone measure.
So congratulations to the attorneys for packaging that in such a way so that we don't run afoul
You buy the
of
peach,
that
you
issue.
get
It's
to see.
all in one package. One question that I do have while we're talking about the 8 consecutive years, I see in one place, my concern is 8 consecutive years as mayor and/or council member. And then the language that I see in the, I guess it's the amended charter language, the "and" is left out, and it's just "or," mayor or council member, which might lead a reader to believe I could serve 8 years as mayor and 8 years on the council.
Glad you brought that up. I caught that as well, and what I would suggest doing is just saying on council. That takes care of it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Do we want to talk about the 2-year term for mayor while we're at this section?
Yeah, this would be appropriate place to do that.
Okay. It was my thought that since Mayor Stanley himself suggested the 2-year terms, that we might ought to think about it more, because the mayor sets the agenda, he has the power, he also has more of a commitment than the rest of the council, because the mayor sits on the audit committee, he sits on this board, that board, and you talk about voter fatigue, what about mayor fatigue? You know, this, to me, this would give a mayor the option of running again every 2 years, as opposed to having to commit for 4 years, and then for whatever reason, if all of our mayors have been business people that work, and particularly like Cole and several others that we've had, they own their own business. So if something happened to their business in that period of time, if their general manager quit or they lost this or that, and they might have to step back in and try to run their business, and they've got this 4-year term stretching out there, why not say the mayor runs every 2 years? And also, I think part of what Mayor Stanley was talking about is he wanted the voters to feel like, because the mayor sets the agenda, because the mayor has most of the power to control what goes on, I think he wanted the public to feel like they were not trapped with a mayor for 4 years, that they could reelect that mayor every 2 years, even though the council would stay there for 4-year terms and give the continuity. The mayor could come in every 2 years. Thoughts?
Well, I think one of the first meetings, I think it was the June 6th meeting, the committee had a pretty robust discussion about that. I think the consensus of the committee at that time was just make it 4 years for everybody. So then you have more or less equality among the council members. Somebody's not having to run every 2 years where everybody else is for 4. So I think there's a continuity there. I think if the mayor had a 2-year term, then when we just talked about term limits, we would need to come up with some other language to address that issue in terms of term limits. But I think the basic direction from the committee was to try and make things simple and consistent for all members of the council. That's the way I read it. And so that's why, in writing this, that's why we did it that way.
Dennis, are there any other cities that are comparable of the studies that you did, the 5 smaller, 5 bigger, that have that, where there's a mayor that runs for a shorter term than the 4-year term council?
I think there may be one, and but I don't recall offhand. I can look it up, but it's most cities that I'm aware of. It's consistent, so 4-year terms for all the mayor and the council member, because they're all council members.
Yeah, I know. I do see. I've actually had 2 people that have approached me that knew I was on this and knew we were talking about, and they said, "Now you're not talking about having the mayor run for 4 years, right? He's going to run 2." I said, "Well."
We did.
Yeah. So I see your point of what you're saying, that the mayor is sort of the leader. The mayor, if there is angst among voters, they want to do something. But I think it would be probably pretty confusing to the public we're having an election every 2 years, but, oh, this one's the mayor, the next one's the council, or is that the mayor, or, so it almost seems like it would be for continuity's sake and just to keep it simple, but I have had 2 people just reach out and ask about that.
Okay.
So,
Okay, Kim, go ahead.
How this works is the green button is, well, I mean, that's what I had some people reach out to me, and I think to sell this and get them to vote, we're gonna, in my opinion, I mean, I don't think our voters are that dumb. I mean, I think they can figure it out. The ones that get out to vote that really care are going to study this. And we keep talking about voter fatigue, voter fatigue. I mean, when I go to the ballot, I do my homework. Now, I may be the rare person because being an educator, I mean, you educate yourself. I mean, I don't think anybody goes into that ballot box with, oh, I'm here to vote, but what am I voting for? I mean, I think we're selling our voters a little bit short here when we keep talking about voter fatigue, voter fatigue, voter fatigue. I mean, if they're ready for a change, they're going to do their homework and they're going to vote the way they want to vote. But I think the 2-year term, I think it's easier to sell 2-year for the mayor, 4-year for the council. Because when you hear people griping and complaining, I mean, we do have those people. I'm probably one of those people. But they gripe about the mayor more than they do the councilman because our mayor is our leader. That's just my opinion.
And
Thank you,
Madam
Kim.
Chair, if I can share, Lubbock was the only city that had a 2-year mayor term and 4-year staggered council terms.
And they are also a city that elects all of their council in single-member district situations. So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
Gary Pittner, just in terms of some thoughts in this regard, and we may have talked about this last time. The way we have always worked, and as I've looked, I'm sitting here looking at those 5 chairs up there, all 5 of those people have the same voting responsibilities and authorities as the guy or gal sitting next to them. So I don't see personally any reason to hold the mayor up in a different way in terms of length of terms because they all carry the same responsibilities to the public.
They really don't, Gary. The mayor sets the
Madam,
agenda.
may I continue?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Another concern that I would have would be it's important, and I think one of the reasons we ended up with a 4-year term situation was we wanted to incentivize, if you will, our electeds to feel comfortable making long-term decisions that may be difficult decisions, yet they're in the best interest of this community moving forward. And 4 years allows for more of that, in my opinion, in the staggered terms, to think in terms of not the immediate political expediency of the decision, but the long-term interest of the city in the decision. I would like my mayor to be motivated by the same thing and feel as though he's comfortable with a 4-year term and can move his or her agenda forward, knowing that there's 4 years there. So, you know, I'm not saying arguments can't be made either way or both ways, but I really hate to set a different length of term. Never mind the fact it blows up our term process language. That can be fixed, I'm sure, if this group wants to do something different. But for what it's worth, that's my opinion.
Okay. Kim? No? Okay. Sandra?
Why do you suppose the mayor himself opted for the 2-year term? He's the mayor. He's the one that said it.
I don't know, but all I know is we're making recommendations, and the council can do with as they see fit on any of these or all of these or none of these.
That was going to be my suggestion. If we can't reach a consensus
Right.
on that, then let's kick it to the council.
Right.
Okay.
You know, if the mayor wants to run for 2-year terms, my deal is let him. Let's don't force him to have to run for 4 years if he wants 2-year terms.
I'm just of the opinion that 4 years is not too long. I mean, 4 years, our Our school board members serve 4 years. Our Amarillo College Board of Regents serve for 6-year terms. Granted, our House members serve 2-year terms. Senate members serve 6. House, or Texas Senate serves 4. U.S. Senate is 6. Texas Senate, Brian, is 4? 4, I believe. And those are pretty heavy workloads. I don't know. I tell you what, not that I would have heard, but this mayor's opinion in terms of the desire for a 2-year term is the first I've heard of a mayor in Amarillo wanting to have a different term than the council.
Well, I think it's up to the mayor. If he wants to run, let's kick it to the council and the mayor. If he wants, I'd say leave it up to the mayor. Don't force him to run for 4 years if he wants to run for 2.
Okay. Other comments? Toby?
I can go either way with this, and I can see arguments for and against the different terms for mayor and councilman. I'll disagree with Sandra a little bit. The argument I want to take out of this discussion is what the current mayor wants to run for. Opinions of the mayor and the councilman, one way or the other, shouldn't factor into what we're trying to do for the position, not the person.
Okay. Dean?
Well, I mean, Toby took the words out of my mouth, but I mean, I was thinking the same thing, basically, that I think we're looking at this from 50,000 foot level, and we're trying to make decisions strategically that are in the best interests of our community, as opposed to not disagreeing. I get it, what Cole's saying, and I think he might be saying that. I say that, I'm putting words in his mouth, that will the voters, I think 4-year terms is going to be tough for the voters. They're going to be thinking that, I want more control than that. I want to be able to vote somebody out if I don't like them. So I think that's going to be a little bit different, and that's might be why, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but might be why he's saying that'll give them a little bit of leverage that the mayor can be terminated in 2 years. But that being said, I agree with what Toby's saying, is that we have to look at this from what's in the best interest of our city as a whole. And if 4 years for all of them, because they all have the same voting rights, is the answer, then that's what we recommend, and whatever they do with it, they do with it. But I think it makes sense. Okay. Well, I can go either way. Right now, I'm kind of leaning towards everybody at 4 years.
I could care less, frankly. Whether they run for 2. May I finish? Don't ever bite an old woman; she'll bite you back. If I am trying to listen to what the mayor and council charged us with, and if the mayor felt like, if you want to get somebody, get me, I can understand that. What you're saying is we're switching at this time from 2 to 4. So I agree with Toby. We don't do it for one person any more than I was worried about protecting districts to protect who's on the council now. You have to think, wait a minute, and he's right. So okay. I don't care.
So Donna.
If you look at past councils that are for 2 years, almost all the mayor and commission will rerun for another 2 more terms. So, most of the time we end up with the mayor for 4 to 6 years and council members for 4 to 6 years. So I don't think 4 years is too long for the mayor.
Okay. Kim.
Everybody has a good argument, but I just think if we want the citizens to get behind changing these terms, I think if you give them some leverage with one position, 2 years, they feel like they have not lost total control. And I think they can wrap their head around that. That's the consensus I'm getting from people that I'm talking to. And we've all talked to people, so, Rodney, come on. What consensus are you getting?
I'm kind of on the fence as well. One of the things that concerns me is every 2 years now we're voting, and like I think you said, is this your mayor? Is this your council? Whatever way. But the other thing is, we're recommending this too. You know, what we've done for 5 weeks may or may not happen. So it's our recommendation that we're putting forward. So, and like you said, if we can't come to a consensus, then that's why we elected those five individuals to come up with things. So I agree with what Donna's saying as well. I mean, 4 years, they're going to run. If it's 2 years, I think they're going to run again anyway and get the 4 years out of it. I agree. It's probably a piece that we're trying to give, but that's why we went through the recall stuff as well. We're giving them that out with I don't know if that's the right verbiage, but yeah, to help get this passed. So that's where we come with the recall. So that would be my.
Dean?
I think maybe we're thinking in terms of winning an election as opposed to, like Dean was talking about, the 50,000-foot view and what Toby says. In the long run, what's best, because I've had that same thought. If the mayor only runs for 2, I can sell this to those people that are saying, I think all of them only run for 2 years and I won't vote for extended terms. And then I could come back and say, but, the mayor's running every 2 years. But that's short term. And you're exactly right.
Well, I'm sitting here on the fence again. I'm leaning towards the 4-year because I do think it's consistent. And I think that's, from what we're talking about, the best interest of our community. But if we want to get into the selling the campaign thing, it might be, we can talk about it, it might be something we need to do at first, and then the next charter committee can change the mayor. I don't know if that's something, we're trying to play games now, and I think we recommend, I don't know, I'm back to recommend what we think is best and see where it lands. But anyway.
Okay,
You got me
Michael?
on the fence again.
Michael? No? Okay. Donna, anything else? No? Okay, Sandra? Gary?
Again, just reminding ourselves, we did soften substantially the recall language to make it easier to throw the bums out. Is that what you said?
No, what
Throw
Josh
the
Krause
bums
said.
out quickly?
What Josh said was, if we suck, throw us out. That's
So
not mine.
I think the
That's
first
Josh
time
Krause.
that we talked about that, we saw that as one of the compromises in terms of softening and maybe selling, but the 4-year terms. But I agree with the sentiment that we're not here to craft a campaign for or against any of this. We're here to suggest what's in the interest of what we collectively think is good government. So,
Madam Chair.
Okay. Yes, Dennis, go ahead.
I think, kind of to Dean's point, we're looking at it from a 50,000-foot level, is the underlying principle should be good governance. And when we're talking about voter fatigue, I think what we're talking about, or what I was referencing, was not having 13 measures on the ballot. It's, from my understanding, most cities are more successful if they have 3 or fewer propositions on the ballot. And so that allows the voter to focus on the big issues. The other concern or thought that I had just listening to the discussion is, if you have a mayor, all 7 members, if this goes forward, all 7 members are elected citywide. If all 6 council members have a 4-year term and the mayor only has a 2-year term, who is in a position to say they have a mandate? Who's in a position to really be the leader? Because you have people that have longer terms, they're elected on the same basis as each other, but the mayor has a shorter leash and doesn't have as much of a mandate, if you will, to rule or to govern. And so I think that's one of the values in having consistent 4-year terms, and I think that's part of what we were talking about a few weeks ago, was everybody's the same. Everybody, each vote up there counts the same. The mayor doesn't have 1.5 votes. It's all equal. And so the more equal that you make the members, and everybody has a citywide platform, that equalizes things. You don't have somebody saying, well, I'm elected citywide and I have a 4-year term, you're elected citywide, but you only have 2 years. And I think to Gary's point, trying to look at the longer term view for the city I think is one of the benefits of having longer terms. So I would just ask the committee to think back to how we got to where we are with the recommendation of the 4-year terms, and frankly, what some of the political realities might be if you had different people on the council with different lengths of terms and different rules to play by.
I agree. That makes sense. We've talked about it. That was just enough people have asked me about it that I said I'll bring it up. We did just kind of let it flow on by, so we've talked about it. And besides, I don't want to mess up your language. It's too good in here.
Okay, Dennis, I'm ready to see if we, on item 4, if we do have consensus for items A through M.
Madam Chair, that's assuming we did the cleanup as we talked about earlier on the.
Yes. Absolutely.
Madam Chair, a quick question for Dennis. I'm sure there's a method to this madness, and I haven't been able to figure it out. In terms of the numbering the places, the odds and evens thing.
Which item is that, Gary?
Well, as you've numbered the places down there in, F number 1, and it appears in several places throughout here. We've got council members, place 1, 2, and 3, and then 2, 4, and 6.
135, 246.
135, 246. Is there a rhyme or reason to that?
Yeah,
Or is there any reason to think in terms of, thank you, or is there any reason to think in terms of the geographic areas being 2, 4, or 1, 2, 3, and the others being 4, 5, 6, or is that just totally random?
It's more or less random.
Okay.
But what I did try and do, and I think it worked out well, is if you look at it, you have the mayor in places 1, 2, 3 running in one sequence, and then you have 4, 5, and 6 in the next sequence, even though there's a mix of at-large and geographic areas. That's what I was trying to address and trying to keep to what the committee's consensus was, the 1, 3, 3. And but yeah, you could renumber them any way that you want. That was just out of my demented mind.
I'm just thinking about, when it comes time,
OCD.
when it comes time to vote, we're voting on 2, 3, and 4. And
I was just
4, 5,
thinking
and
1,
6.
2, 3, and the mayor.
That works too.
Yeah,
Yeah. I just wondered if there was a reason for that. And there's not, so you've answered my question. Thank you.
All right, so let's see if we have consensus. I know. Okay, committee, what are you all thinking on item 4? Yeah. Okay.
You want a formal recommendation?
No, just as long as we have consensus. I just want to make sure, I want to give everybody an opportunity, if you have additional comments, make sure that you're good with these items. Toby?
Let me ask one more question. Dennis, this is where we landed on item K on 2 full terms. I know we're changing that language, and you cannot run for an additional term for a different seat, such as from council member to mayor, without a 2-year absence.
Correct.
Okay.
I think Gary mentioned indeed we need and/or
Mhm.
there, so we'll make that correction.
Right.
So, Madam Chair, if a motion is in order, I would move that the committee confirm the consensus decisions as outlined on this evening's agenda, with
Okay.
the corrections as noted.
Okay. I have a motion, and do I have a second? Okay. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed? Okay, no one opposed? Okay. All right. Okay. Ready to, moving on here, we're going to go to item 5, and that is discuss redistricting criteria to support the development of an official geographic area map. And if you've, I believe that information is also in your packet. That is, let me get over here really quick here. That's on page 7 of your packet. Okay. Okay, we're going to review these items. Dennis?
Excuse me. So we discussed these criteria last week, and basically what we had tried to do in drafting this was to give a frame of reference for the council and the community as far as how the districting process would work. We tried, I think, to make sure that we were well grounded in Federal Voting Act requirements as well as federal and state court decisions and state law. We tried to put in some criteria that made sense to, as far as avoiding gerrymandering, to have things follow natural boundaries within the city. The emphasis last week was about maintaining neighborhoods and cohesive neighborhoods. One of the principles of sound districting is to have things as compact as possible so you don't have these weird shaped districts, which oftentimes the weird shaped districts are gerrymandered for other reasons. Heavy emphasis on retaining communities of interest based on cultural, ethnic things. One criteria was paying attention to schools and parks and public facilities that are essential to an area's identity and functioning. So the criteria really are, as I mentioned last week, are kind of an amalgamation of policies or criteria that I've seen in other cities, and just listening to the discussion of this group, trying to capture what your concerns or what your goals were. And so we just wanted to reconfirm that we're on the right path, and these are the kinds of things that should be paid attention to whenever the district lines are created.
Okay. Comments? Anyone? Everybody good? Do we have a consensus on this item? I'll accept the motion.
I would think that every 10 years when this happens, that there will be professional legal assistance provided to this body in terms of the redistricting lines that would be appropriate based upon the conditions that existed following that census, correct?
I believe you put that in there, didn't you, Dennis?
Yes.
Yeah, it is in here.
And I can just say from personal experience, I managed the redistricting process in my hometown 10 years ago. And so what we did at that time, we had criteria or principles that were established by the preceding group, and then we adopted those and added some that we felt were relevant at that point in time for our city. And so I would envision that this is kind of a starting point, and I think it would be helpful for the council because they'll need to set these boundaries going forward. But every panel is going to do that in their own regard.
All right, any additional comments? Okay. I believe we have consensus. Is that correct from everybody? Okay. All right, I'm seeing lots of head nods, so we're good. Okay. Moving on to item 6, discuss recommendation to add charter review as a charter amendment or to the governance and ends policy. Dennis.
So there had been, there had been discussion several times in the committee about possibly creating a new section in the charter to mandate or create a charter review commission and a regular review process. And so there was discussion last week about charter amendment or doing it in terms of the governance and ends policy. And so what I did was draft both a proposed charter amendment, which I hope captures the intent, and then I also proposed an alternative of a policy to add to the governance and ends regarding charter review. They could be done together, kind of buttressing one another, or one versus the other. And I think part of the discussion or decision of the committee will be if you want to add another measure to the ballot and have it created in the charter, or as was someone mentioned last week, was start with the policy, see how it goes, and then if necessary, do the amendment later. So what I wanted to do was to provide the committee with both options and see which direction you felt comfortable with.
Okay. All right, committee.
I would propose a third option, ordinance. You have everything. You could do it any way you wanted to. You could pass an ordinance that would require it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Dennis, help me out. How many propositions are we looking at right now if we were to include this? Is this the third one, since this would be the fourth one?
So right now, we'd have what's proposed or under consideration. We have the recall option ordinance, the restructuring of the mayor and council composition and election methods. If you add the city manager clarification on the consultation on hiring, and when we get to that, a little more discussion, and then the charter amendment. So we'd be looking at 4 amendments if everything that's on the table now you move forward for vote by the public.
And Stephanie, the last time we did amendments to the charter, we had how many propositions in front of the voters?
We had 3 in front of the, no, I believe it was 3.
3.
And 1 passed.
Okay, and the time before that?
21.
Okay.
And they, yeah, 21.
But they were predominantly cleanups.
Right.
That's all that was, yeah.
Except for the recall.
Except for the recall.
Except for the recall, the bomb in the whole thing.
Well, if we're not getting carried away with numbers, I kind of like codifying that in the charter itself. It's like a set of bylaws. You have provisions in bylaws as to how you amend the bylaws. It seems to make sense to me that a document like this would make sense to contain within the charter language to amend that charter or the process to. But from a practical standpoint, I guess that's a belt and suspenders kind of way to do it in terms of getting it codified in the charter, and it's a little bit harder to ignore when it's sitting in the charter, or to change or to amend an ordinance. But I guess my concern is that there's some systematic way to look at this, so that we don't end up going 20 years without paying attention to the charter.
I just want to mention one other thing, is if in the language I put or suggested to meet, the Charter Commission meet in even numbered years, and my thought was if they met, for example, in 2026 and you have the election in 2027, that gives the commission ample time and the council ample time to consider what to move forward if an election is scheduled. So it kind of times any potential charter election along with regularly scheduled city elections, which I think has a cost benefit to the city.
If I may, Madam Chair, it does have a cost benefit to the city. The other side of that, though, you might have to consider, is the campaign ongoing, so it could impact your council that's in office.
we probably ought to also consider, as far as charter review, having them meet after the state legislature goes out of session for that session, because that's where the changes are made that usually affect our charter. So if they're, however that would stagger, the legislature and then the charter review meets after that so they can address the changes that need to be made as far as housekeeping.
Other thoughts, comments?
Madam Chair, yeah, I'll ask just for some clarification. So governance and ends, who makes that decision if that policy goes into that ordinance? Who makes the decision on that policy? And then obviously charter review is voted by the voters. I just wanted to clear that part up so I understand for sure.
So the governance and ends policy and an ordinance, that would be the council's decision, and the charter amendment would be a vote of the people.
I don't really think most voters care whether there's a charter review committee or not. That's something that the council probably should address. They always have. And if they can look at it along with city management and say, you know, we're in trouble because we've had legislative changes, we need to do this, or something blew up and we need to look at the charter. So I think it ought to be left with the council instead of putting it to the voters, because I don't think the voters give a rip about charter amendments. I know, and couldn't find it if they had to.
And I agree. And who put this committee together anyway?
Council.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So why reinvent the wheel? Let's just put it in their hands. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so basically, are we going to say governance and ends policies? Because that's really what the council, is that what the committee is thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And just a quick
Toby?
question, maybe this is for Brian. Is there not something in the governance and ends, when you have an archaic language or when state law gets passed that conflicts with our city charter, can we not just update the charter? Do we have to get permission?
It's just not that simple.
I tried. I've been beating that drum exactly like you think. It has to be that way.
Texas
Like
state law
everything.
supersedes Amarillo city law. But
If I can explain it to you, if something is instituted by a vote of the citizens, it has to be changed by a vote of the
Right,
citizens.
there you go.
Just like with our resolutions and ordinance, if we pass a resolution, it takes a resolution to repeal it. If we pass an ordinance, it takes an ordinance to repeal. And so once the citizens have voted, it takes citizens to undo or to change.
even if Texas law,
Yes. Now, there are sections in our charter that say Texas law prevails, in essence, like the election articles is one of them, where we say, at the end of the day, we follow Texas election code. So,
but I agree with the consensus that putting this on the ballot is not something I would recommend.
Okay, so committee consensus on governance and ends policy? Is that what we're thinking?
Just one more question. This is fine. I can go either way. Stephanie, clarify for us kind of our history again. Didn't we go for a long period of time without any kind of look at a charter, which maybe accounts for some of the inconsistencies with state statute, not staying up to speed in that regard? Although we've had a couple here recently, there were some gaps.
we did. So from 1980 forward, we had an election in April 5th, which was turned down. We had another election August in 1980, then 1989, then 2013, which was the one with the 21 propositions.
So we went
and
from
then
89
2020.
to 2013 without this being looked at.
It does, yes. So if state law says specifically we can't do something, then it prevails. In essence, as a home rule city, anything that state law is silent to, then our charter can speak to. And did I get that right?
You did.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
to Brian's point, I think if it was the direction of the committee, you could recommend the council governance ends or ordinance or a combination, so that would give the council more latitude in its decision.
Whatever they need to do, give it to them.
But typically, the charter trumps governance and ends.
Always.
Oh,
Not always.
yes.
Not always. Okay, you said.
No. Yeah, if the charter speaks to it, then it controls. But the governance and ends policies are meant to fill out those parts of the charter where they're silent to. And so, especially if those things just have to do with procedural matters, of how council handles things, or how the city manager handles things, or how staff's going to handle something, that's really what they're for. They're to try to give some idea of what I would call the expectations of what city council has for the city manager, and what the city manager is supposed to expect, and what staff's supposed to expect. That's really what it's at. That's really what the governance and ends policy is.
I'd really call them administrative procedures, if you would, because that's what they are.
Yes. Yes. I think of it like a syllabus you used to get in school, of the very first day of, here's how they're going to grade you, and here's the weights, and here's what I'm going to expect of you, and here's what you're going to expect of me.
When did the governance and ends, when did the city start doing that?
Let's see, was it 20, did we start that in 2017?
I believe so.
I think it was 2017 when we started it.
2015 and then 2019 and
2019 is when we adopted
Okay, that's
the
when
full
we,
governance and
see, I
ends
thought we
policies.
started it during my term, is what I was thinking, so, okay, thank you. Okay,
I know this council said, Tom, Les, when y'all got in office, you got that real quick lesson of that syllabus. How much training do y'all get on the governance and ends? A day?
Probably not much.
It was being part of the overall orientation.
Yeah, I mean, we got the document, and we actually got it in our packet when we were running. Is that right, Stephanie?
Yes, you got it in your packet when you were running. There were a couple of very summarized slides that we gave to the candidate orientation, and then we went in a little more detail on a presentation for council orientation.
And to be truthful, during that period of time, there was so much coming at us. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of information that comes our way, that I'm pretty spongy, but I didn't absorb some of it.
Well,
when you hit the wall.
That's right.
Oops.
I think it's fair to say that those policies are relatively new to the operation of the city of Amarillo in terms of our history. And, they weren't fundamental. Moses did not set those out in stone when we were established back in the 1880s. That's a relatively new creation of a prior administration. And, there's still some living into, I think, to take place with how those work and how those fit in, and how they do jive or don't jive with the charter and specificity, and how specific you want to be, and what's their general purpose. It's a new tool that's in the relatively new tool that's in the toolbox. I don't want anybody to think that that's been something that's been out there in the operation of this municipality for a long time, because it's not. That's relatively new.
That's why I was saying about 2017 is about when we started that. So you're absolutely correct.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Baker Tilly's been retained by the city to work with the council on revisiting governance and ends and some other things, so that'll be another phase in our work with the city.
Okay. And thank you for that reminder. Appreciate that. Okay, I think we have consensus on item 6. Okay, everybody good?
So we are adding it to voting, or
We're not. We're not. No, please ask the question, because we want to make sure that everybody's clear and we have a good understanding. So, Rodney, you good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Michael? Good? Okay. All right. We will move on to item 7, which is discuss potential specific ballot language for committee recommendations to the City Council. And I think you guys probably should have that handout in front of you. And do you have any additional questions? Because I think we've kind of reviewed that. And Dennis, I'll defer to you for additional comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight, what we prepared for your review is we broke down, remember last week I had kind of a big giant document. We broke it down into each individual measure or potential measure to give you a little bit more insight into the details of what each would look at. So we did a red line version, and so what we did was if there was existing language in the charter that we were changing, for example, in the recall portion, that was lined out, and then the new text was inserted. So what I would suggest is go in order of the articles. So the first item would be the recall, which is Article 1, Section 25. I'm sorry, 24. And here summarizes that we do away with the 30% of the registered voters, with 1/5 saying that they voted for the person in the last election, simplifying it to 30% of the number of votes cast in the last election for that official. And we also extended the petition gathering period from 30 days to 60 days. I believe that was a consensus last week. So you have before you what essentially would be before the voters.
Madam Chair, if I may, to hit on Mr. Dawson's comment from earlier on the 6 months, the way that our terms are set in the charter right now, they serve until someone else is appointed to replace them and takes office. And so what you may want to do on the second page in subsection H, instead of saying within 6 months of the end of the term, and Brian, correct me here, but maybe something within 6 months of the next uniform election date at which the officer may run for re-election. And that solves that issue with the uncertain term end.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Is there consensus on Article 1, Section 24, the recall provisions with the noted clarification?
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. You good, Kim? Okay. Gary? Okay. All right. Okay.
So the next section will be kind of the largest one. It's Article 5, and the changes basically are made in sections 1 through 6. And this basically is intended to capture the change to 7 members, 4-year staggered terms, clarifying how vacancies are filled to make it more consistent, make it consistent with state law. The resign to run rule that we talked about, and that's more operational now because the terms are more than 2 years, so that's needed. And then clarifying the council, the at-large seats versus the geographic area seats. And I just wanted to mention that what you have is the broad concepts, and frankly, it needs to be worked on a little bit more with Brian's expertise to tighten things up a little bit. There's some redundancies and things of that nature that need to be cleaned up. So, but the spirit of what is here is what the committee has talked about, and there's other things that Brian can discuss as far as ordinances and those kinds of things. But basically, this is the crux of what we're doing, is changing the method of the election of the mayor and council, extending the terms, and these other things that go along with that, those changes.
Was there ever talk, I can't remember if we talked about this or not, but instead of making that all one, splitting that up, I know we don't want too many on there, but there's a lot going on in there. And we're talking about, I guess from the beginning, I thought these would all be separate issues, like extending, making the council from 5 to 7, 4-year staggered terms, creating a geographical area. And those, I guess there's 3 issues in there, correct? Is there any advantage to breaking those out or keeping it all in one?
I think there's a definite advantage in keeping it all in one, because if you broke it into other things, you run the risk of
one passing and the
other one not. And it really is, it's a system. And so I think the voters would understand you're basically changing the system, and so it's a package.
Yeah, I get that.
And am I right? The only one I was thinking that we could separate was the number of council members, but we can't do that because once you exceed 5, you change the rules, correct?
Actually, it's not the number of council, it's how long they're there. And so really, once you decide to go longer than 2, then all the vacancy rules change now. You've got to have your own rule, and the state rule is going to apply. The second thing that you have to think about is, when does a vacancy occur? When someone announces candidacy. Because now that changes, and that changes another section. So those things are all tied to that longer term. So those things could all be one thing. And in an effort to try to shorten this, which can be done, what you're trying to do is, your basic ballot language is going to say, the mayor and each council member shall serve a term of 4 years. And then what I would propose saying is, with those terms being staggered, provided by ordinance and conforming amendments as required by state law. So when you say that, then that's what they're voting on. If that passes, the rest of this can be done. I can stagger it with an ordinance. I can get us all where we're supposed to be based on these concepts, and it'll be exactly this concept, because council will pass that after the election is certified.
So you're saying to kind of take out the last half of it, explaining how it would actually work.
How the stagger would work.
Yes.
Now, you can leave it in if you want.
No, I think.
But what it does is you just transfer, like, what you do is like in section 5, when it says elections. When you see that, all that is setting up the stagger. Well, you can do that with an ordinance afterwards.
And Brian, if I may, I think Michael's looking at this one page that has the proposition language that would be on the ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus.
Yeah.
Am I not looking at the right page? Yeah, I was talking about how it'd be on the ballot. Is that what we're looking at?
We're about to get to that.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Jumping
okay.
ahead.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay.
That's what I'm concerned with. How does this look on the?
Yeah.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'll shorten it way up so you won't have a lot of this. The concept will still be there. And I think that went to Toby's question. It's about what will the voter actually see? And there will be a way to shorten it so it's real clear.
About 7 4-year terms
Mm-hmm.
staggered.
That's right, that's right.
Okay, so
That will be
what
the
page
goal.
are y'all on?
I'm reading.
Because I'm,
So, see this one right here, Michael?
Section of Article 5 be amended so that they're
Yeah.
after the same
page 4. Okay, I'm with you.
packet of the, yeah.
So Dennis and
I'm
Brian.
sorry, I should have said that too, so everybody could be on the same page, so.
So what we tried to do was to give you the, not exact language, but give you more of the substance of each measure. And then this was designed to kind of give you an idea of what would be on the ballot that the voters would see. And so to Brian's point, we can shorten that.
Exactly right, and so is Toby. Short, voters want a shortcut to information.
So back to Michael's question, we could, in theory, separate on the ballot the number of council members, but I'm thinking because we've kind of come to consensus in the way we've decided to elect those at large and geographic residency requirements, we've tied it together because we couldn't just have them pass 7 members, because then it would apply to the same rules that we have now. It would be 7 at-large 2-year terms if that was the only one to pass.
We like this age.
Right.
I think are we good?
And since we are going to 4-year terms, be sure to get the requirement in there that these people have to be dipped when they're sworn into office in addition to, just kidding, I was being a smart aleck. I was suggesting that they be dipped
Sprinkled.
at the time that they were sworn into office in addition to the swearing in. Since it's gone to 4 years,
Who have you been hanging out with?
or maybe baptized, I don't know, how's that?
Maybe, I believe I'd say baptized instead of dipped.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right, 7, so we're good then, right? That's a lot of money.
Well, then we could have one more amendment. We could change the compensation from $10 a week, $10 a meeting to $100 a meeting. Do you think that'd give anybody culture shock?
Absolutely. Moving on to item 8. I'm not even going down that road.
Sandra, your horses aren't alive anymore.
All right, prioritize charter update recommendations for city council consideration. So if you, now, Michael, let's go to this page over on the right-hand side where it says they're not in priority order.
Madam Chair, I just
Did
want
I
to
miss
clarify
one?
on
I'm
the
sorry.
city manager authority.
Yes.
What, I want to be clear what if the committee is comfortable with that language, or if we need to discuss that one item.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I got my word, that's all I wanted. I just wanted from consent to consult. It's not even a change of the first letter.
Okay.
Then we'll name it Proposition C.
Other comments along those lines?
Thank you.
Well, we did further clarify those staff members that would be subject to such.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was wide open before, which was part of the problem, I think.
Right, and that is, I did see that language in here as well. Okay, we're good? All right. Okay, now, charter review, proposed ballot measures, and see in the right-hand side of the page, it says not in priority order. That's the document that we're looking at here. So this is where we're going to do a dot voting exercise. And I believe I,
I
and-
don't know, I've got one,
I'm sorry.
can I ask one question?
Yes, you sure can.
And I don't want to, but it's a question, because the next step is going to be presenting to council, and it's a question that I have in my mind. Not that it has to be answered tonight, but before we get to this point, it's just gotten me to thinking about something, which is, when I look at these changes, and by the way, I mean, the amount of, and I have no heartburn about any of these. I think all these are great and good thing, and I think you've made a lot of headway in a very brief amount of time, and I think this is going to be very beneficial to council on a number of issues, regardless of what goes to the charter, whether it's approved or not. So I want to say I appreciate it, because I didn't know we would get this far, to be honest with you, and I think we've had some good conversation and some good discussion with it. My question is, and this would be a question that I would ask in a couple of weeks when you come to present, and I'm not saying that we have to have an answer, but I don't know if this will relate to what we're about to do. When I look at the ones that are proposed, I kind of look at the moving parts within each. And when I look at recall and term limits, very few moving parts in that. That's pretty clear on what that is. When I look at the other, though, and I really didn't notice this until I saw it all in writing together, we've been going painfully step by step, and we talk about one issue at a time, and we come up with a resolution in that issue, and then we go to another. But when I look at the council composition, adding 2 members, going to staggered terms, going to 4-year terms, establishing districting commissions, I think to myself, that is a lot of moving parts on that issue. And does each moving part have the potential to cause more heartburn among voters? Because there is more moving parts to it. And I'm not saying this is not a good system, but as we begin to think about prioritizing, it would just be beneficial, I think, for council to know, and maybe council will say, this is we have a good, better, best. And maybe this is the best. Maybe there's something that's better than good, but not quite best. But I don't know. As I just sat here and looked at all this together, I think in one part, there's so many things if they don't like just one part of it, and you've got 4 or 5 different elements to that. Is that got a good chance for success? Or is it something that you would want to say, if we wanted to start peeling off layers, is there, what layer would we not want to peel off, or would there be layers to peel off? And that's just, when I saw it all together, I just kind of said, wow, that has got a lot of moving parts to it.
I'm afraid, Les, if y'all peel off layers, you're going to sink the boat.
Well, I'm just talking about, we're talking about good governance here. And, and again, I'm just saying for us to be able to look at the options and talk them through, I know this is a really good, but we still, I just look at pieces of it, and while I do hope and think that a lot of voters do homework, a lot of voters may just hear buzzwords, and they may hear things, and I think that's why the why we're doing it is really more important than the what we're doing, and you got to communicate the why. But is there, again, if you were to look at rating the importance of these, adding more council members, staggered terms, adding 4-year terms, if you just said, hey, I'm going to rank these from 1 through 4 or 1 through 5 on how important I think they are in that, saying you had to make a choice, not that we're separating them, I'd just be interested in knowing how you would rank that if we begin to say, boy, I don't know if maybe people don't want 2 more council members. Maybe they think 5 of us is enough.
They do.
Well, you say that, Sandra, I know, but you have certain people that talk to you and certain people that talk to other people. But I'm just saying, giving us a kind of a priority on, but if everybody thinks it's got to be all this or none, then maybe we don't have to discuss it. But for me, I just said, it's a lot for the voter to digest. And it has a lot of things for people to say, well, I like this, but I don't like that. So that's kind of my question about it.
I wrote a little narrative that I plan to use, and it's like what we recommended, why we recommended it, and what it means. And I just took these pieces like you're talking about, and said we listened to the council, we worked with Baker Tilly, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, we recommended increasing the size of the council from the current 4 council and mayor to 6. 3 of the council members required to be residents of certain geographic areas. All council members and the mayor will run at large. All voters will have the opportunity to vote on each council member. We spent much deliberation and review of requirements of the Federal Voting Rights Act to determine why we were doing these geographic, if the increase in the number of council and residency are required or passed by voters. A districting panel, I went through what we did, why we did it, and then I said, why? All of us in Amarillo know that there are areas of this city that have always been underrepresented. The council and committee were adamant that this representation needed to be fixed, and fixed now. By increasing the size of the council and setting residency requirements for 3 of the council members, while at the same time giving all voters the opportunity to vote for all representatives, we felt that windows of opportunity for candidates from underrepresented areas of the city would be opened and encouraged. Voter engagement would increase. The more options to run and vote, the more citizens may feel they have a vote in how their city is governed. It was of interest that when we reviewed the population demographics, more than at least half of the population of the city now live north of I-40 and east of I-27, with growth increasing that direction. A definite indication that action must be taken to increase representation. So we did what we hope will achieve more robust, diversified representation and engagement by all citizens of the city. I think if we take our own narrative and that approach, that we did this because we want more representation, we want voters engaged, we want the representation diversified, and we want more action and ability to get things done. And then
I don't argue with you on the merits of that. I'm just saying, for me, as I look at this,
yeah,
it's just, there's a lot of moving parts here. I want to have chance for success, and not saying that we don't, that we don't do all of it. But for me, it's just going to be. I mean, I wish everybody had the time to spend in the community to look at this and research this, but they don't. And it's just going to be interesting in how we message this. But I just think it's something that concerns me, that you have a lot of moving parts, and if one person says, I like 3 parts, but I don't like the 4th, and another person says, I like these parts, I don't like these other 2, again, I was just looking for some kind of thing that said, hey, if you had 5 children and you had to rank them, we're not going to tell anybody. But if you were forced to rank them, if you just said, hey, this is something that I say, if I were looking at good governance, I would say this is, of all the 5 on here or whatever, this is a fundamental thing that's key, that is going to advance it the most. And maybe you can't separate them out, but again, when I started thinking about the voters, and I appreciate that, but I'm telling you, most voters, they're busy living their own lives. They're not going to have they're not going to take the time or even have a conversation to listen. That's why the messaging is going to be so important on the why here. But I don't know, just a thing when I saw it all together at one time, I said that is a lot for a voter to bite off and chew, and then much less really say I support all of these things.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, and I agree with Les that it's not so much the wording, it is the fact that you got to be okay with all four different things. If you put them on and let people vote separately, some could pass and some couldn't. Some wouldn't matter in effect. For example, if you go to 4-year staggered terms, let's say that's the only thing that passed. If you split all those up, that still works, right? I mean, if that was the only thing and all the other ones failed, that got accomplished, correct? Nothing else is like in front of that. But if they did if they increased, or if they did 4-year staggered terms and increased the number of council members, could that pass on its own? Without saying, well, that one has to pass or it doesn't. You know what I'm saying?
You
like
could
the water
add council members, and that could stand alone.
Yeah. You could?
Well, yeah, because it'd just be 2-year terms, and you'd have 7 now.
That's what I'm saying. So, what if we added the 7, we went to 7 council members, and the other things didn't pass, we still get to add council members.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could do that.
So, yeah, I think, I agree that there's just, it's not the language or the anything like that. It's just the fact that there's 4 things in here that everyone has to be good with, or it does, it's 4 or nothing if we put it all in one like that.
Have you ever been shopping where you had to buy all of something to get all the moving pieces, and you look at it and you think, okay, I really don't want the blue socks that match this, but I
No.
really like that shirt or whatever.
No. Yeah, I don't care about that
I don't
stuff.
care about socks.
Just give me the blue socks, I don't
Okay,
care.
if you're buying a wrench set and it comes with, and it comes with a tire tool
Yeah.
and a toolbox, and you think, I really want the tire tool and the wrench set. I hate that toolbox, but I really want those too. Did you ever buy it and not want all of it?
I have, but it wasn't an emotional decision like I feel like voting is. This is an emotional, you have a thing, I mean, there might be a hill that someone's dying on. I am not doing 4-year staggered terms. Absolutely not. I agree with the 5 council, adding to 7, but I think voting is just sort of an emotional thing where people may have a hill they're going to die on, and if it's lumped in all together, not doing it.
I think the only hill we're going to see is the difference between 2-year terms and 4-year terms. That's the biggie. That the diehards that are mad at everybody, it's, by God, I'm not electing those people for any more than 2 years. I don't care. I don't like them. They haven't done anything. All they've done is waste time on this sanctuary city thing. I don't want them in there. They're not going to go for 4-year terms no matter what. But I think most people, if they look at the whole package and go, okay, increase the council, that's a good thing. Everybody wants staggered terms. Even the ones that think they want 2-year staggered terms, when you tell them it's going to cost the city $500,000 or $1 million in 5 years, they'll still say, fine, I pay taxes, let's do it. But I think they have to look at the whole ball of wax and go, okay, I like this, I like this, I like this. If they're hung on 2-year terms, they're not going to like any of it. I mean, we're going to lose those. No.
And I think that's exactly Les's point. And what you wrote there is very well written. The problem is you can't stand outside all the polling places and stop everyone before they walk in and say, before you go vote, listen.
But I can put it on social media in 14 places, and I will tell you, I think I would recommend to the council that before you actually put it on the ballot, where you can't then say anything about it, that the council have a session and use a format. Here's what we're recommending, why we're recommending it, and what it means to you before you get cut off at the feet because you can't campaign. I think you can say what you're doing, why you're doing, and what it means. And I think if we're going to sell any of this, that everybody can write their own narrative, whatever works for you, and it can go out on social media, and I can even change Tom's mind on social media. I've done it.
That's hard to do.
I know. About like mine.
Okay, Dean?
And Rodney can change mine.
Well, I mean, I think I agree with everything that Sandra is saying. I want to kind of touch on what Les is saying, because I think you've got a point there. Some of these things can stand alone, and maybe they should, but then, it's kind of a catch-22 because we don't want too many things on the ballot. So would it help? I mean, we're just doing a recommendation to you guys. Would it be helpful for you guys if we did do the little dot priority thing and unpack this one thing and say, what is this group's priorities if you were to have to unpack this and do it a different way? Would that be helpful?
I just think it would be helpful just to know.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I'm always of the mindset, and whether it would be a financial bond issue or something on the charter amendment, I don't believe in putting bond issues out there just to test the winds. I think you should put something out there that you think has got a good chance of passing. There's nothing worse for the community than a bond issue that fails. And we've seen that, you know, in 2016 when we put 6 on there at one time, 4 of them failed, 2 of them passed. I mean, bond issues have failed. A failed bond issue really sets a negative to the community. I don't think the charter's quite that much, but I would like to make sure that whatever we're putting out there, not that we know if it's going to pass or not, but we feel like it has got a pretty realistic, you know, a
That
pretty good
it's going to make,
chance
it's
of
going to make
passing.
sense to people.
And I think I would just be interested to know, and then, you know, I don't think it's a question we have to answer tonight, but I would be interested when you look at staggered terms, length of terms, adding members, having members live geographically. How would you kind of rank those if you had to choose an order for them of what is you know, what most helps get government to be better if you had to choose?
Well, as we do this little dot exercise, Dennis, if you're going to facilitate that and take us through that, can we unpack this one proposition and list those things and prioritize those? It won't take long. I think everybody's got I think everybody knows what their priorities are.
Well,
I
I'd
do.
rather ask the question tonight than whenever it's presented and say, well, I have this question that I probably should have asked 2 weeks ago. But
But when y'all decide this, you're going to give transparency to the citizens of why this has come about. Because I think when that 4-year stagger came up last time, citizens had this feeling like, well, those people want to protect their position for 4 more years. But Frida, that was not y'all's intent.
No, but that's the way it was,
Had their mindset.
right. That's how it was perceived, and so,
But it never came from the council's mouth, out of y'all's mouth, babe, that y'all were not intending that, correct?
no, we said that. Yes, we said that.
I missed that.
Well, people don't get it.
But they don't get it, yeah.
You know, they have, when I try, I've done some
Sandra, would you use your,
experiments on social media, and when you put it out, give me the other one.
make sure everybody can hear it.
Can I have about 5 more, please? There's somebody on Amarillo Boulevard that hadn't heard me yet. When I threw it out there, and I got the hardcore, well, what does that mean? Or I'm not doing that, or I'm not giving those people any longer terms. And I said, wait a minute, you've forgotten something. We have an election in 2025. Now, all of these idiots that you don't like, that you're calling idiots and whatever else, they've got to run. If you don't want them to have a 4-year term, find somebody you like. Get them to run for office and vote for them. Don't vote for somebody that you wouldn't trust for longer than 2 years. And I kind of got this, well, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. They think in terms of everybody who's there being extended instead of re-electing them again. And that was the thing I think that got missed before. And if I remember that vote, it was like 48% to 52%.
Yeah,
It
it was
wasn't
real
that
close.
far off
yeah, it wasn't.
What was that? What, for what?
for 4-year terms.
4-year terms, yeah. Okay,
So I
no,
think
that's
it's
right.
a lot of it is in presentation, and you have to say to people and get that message across. If the council says, now, folks, we're recommending this because, I'm not asking you to vote for me, I'm asking you to vote for whoever you would trust to govern your city for 4 years, period. Is that?
Gary?
So I agree with that, but I just feel like. Okay. See, she agrees with me. Did y'all hear Sandra agreeing with me?
Not in his pocket.
I agree. I completely agree. I just don't know that when we talk about the messaging and social media and people just not hearing it. And no. I'm just saying, if we're saying, okay, we got $100,000 in the budget and we're all going to spend that and we're going to run Google ads and Facebook ads and we're going to make sure this gets, it's like,
They can't do that anyway.
I know that. I'm just saying, when it comes to business and marketing and getting the message across, just kind of hoping and all agreeing here, we're going to go home and post it on Facebook, that just doesn't, I don't feel like that gets in front of enough people with actual hard data. Like, yeah, we're going to get in front of this many people. I completely agree with you that, even if you said you missed it at the council meeting. I don't watch all the council meetings. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not a good citizen. Sorry, Les, Tom. I don't.
This is some good entertainment.
I know. Now, I'll watch some of them. My point is, I just don't think the 98% of the citizens who are engaged, who do care about these issues, are going to hear any of us, especially the.
Citizens that didn't even know anything, talked to them about sanctuary city.
Right. That's my point, is that even if the messaging is solid and what you wrote is fantastic, I just feel like when people walk up, it's going to be very simple. I agree with one of those things, but not the other three. Or I agree with 3, but not 4. Not doing it.
I tell you one thing, though, is, and after running for office, is the good thing is with this is you know who the voters are. And you could, you can target the voters because you can look at it and you can buy a list of who voted in the last 4 municipal elections and who's going to show up there. So there is the ability to target that. And that's why you still see a whole lot of direct mailing campaigns because, they know that the voters are there. So, but to your point, I think, you really have to target your message to the people who are most likely to show up to vote instead of necessarily blanketing. I don't know about social media one way or the other. They claim that they can target or whatever, but I think people still use direct mail a lot because people, and particularly when you're looking at a messaging campaign, instead of just, that people would be more likely to be able to digest. And voters who are generally over the age of 50 for the most part, not, mostly it's those people, they'll take the time to look at something like that. I think there are ways to do it, but it just has to be pretty targeted, I think, to reach.
And that costs money.
Oh yeah, you can do block walking and those types of things, but somebody's going to have to, if they want.
That's my point.
Outside of council in the city could not.
Yeah.
I don't think when we finish tonight, our job is done.
Yeah, I don't either.
We worked hard on this. We wanted to pass. We're going to have to continue to work.
And that's what we discussed in week 1.
Right.
Well, this is going to, I think charter amendments are always kind of tricky in terms of, we're not asking anybody to spend any money, we're really trying to educate the public. It's this trust thing and the lack of trust thing that we're trying to overcome out there with education. And even if you put political action committees together to fund an education campaign, I will guarantee you that the public will see a boogeyman behind that pack and start connecting the dots and saying, oh, this is this cabal trying to exercise their influence to do such and such.
And Sandra, she's behind it all.
That kind of thing. So whatever we do in this regard, whether it's what the council can do, what citizens can do, this is going to have to be based upon educating the public, not selling the public. We're educating the public.
Paid for by Sandra McCart.
Right. Yeah, we're trying to.
Educate yourself, and you go to those meetings or whatever, but then
Right.
at the schools, wherever they have them, because it is affected by money, so I'm.
Sure. Doubly interested. Now, not that they shouldn't be interested in this, but,
Right. But you've got Michael J., who follows the city politics.
who's Michael J.?
Making sense with Michael J.
Yeah.
Oh, is he a radio guy?
Radio guy.
These guys on, to explain different things. That's a media outlet. I think you can just use lots of different, besides social media, you could use different media outlets to get the message across.
And Madam Chair, we may be kind of straying from this. Dennis,
Yeah.
you've
I know.
total control of the discussion here.
Yeah.
But in terms of the conflict, if you were to pull this apart again, I think we've given you 2 or 3 sets of instructions, and we've wavered back and forth. But the one that I see as difficulty in pulling apart is trying to move forward with the residency thing with the 5-member council. Those two things don't fit. Those two pieces of the puzzle don't fit together. independently.
You can't build a boat and then start taking pieces out of it and think it's going to float. And we've built a boat. Now, you're on that council, you figure out how to make it work.
No, Sandra, you're not getting by that easy.
Madam Chair.
Okay.
Sandra, let the record
Okay,
reflect that I
Dennis,
agree with your
it's
vote
about
analogy.
7:15, so
Do it.
let's move forward with the dot
can, but you don't want to.
exercise.
Madam Chair, can I say one thing?
Yes, Toby.
All right, so I may be stepping all over this dot exercise, but when I pull this big proposition apart, I see 4 things in it. I see 2 that I think you can combine, and 2 that I'm going to ask Dennis if we could separate, because I share Councilman Simpson's concern over this. It's a lot to digest, and like Michael said, if there's one piece they don't like, they're going to vote it out. I think all these things we've come up with are good ideas, but that doesn't mean that everybody agrees with all parts of our good ideas. So the moving from 2-year terms to 4-year terms, can we write a separate proposition that ties that together with term limits, where it says the proposition will recommended to move council member and mayor terms from 2 to 4 years with a 2-term limit piece, because that gives the voters, okay, they want to lengthen them, but they're going to limit them. So it's a balance. So I can see that being a separate piece. And then is there a possible language, I don't know, where you write to increase the council from 5 to 7, or from council places 4 to 6, period. And then the next proposition be, if in the passage of whatever that was, Proposition B, C, D, and we increase the number of council members, then the residency requirements for places, whatever it is, 1, 3, 5, go into place. Is that a possibility? Can you make separate propositions that rely on the passage of one to enact the other?
Toby, I think if you do that, when you give people the option of 2 to 4 year terms, that's like saying, okay, do you want to stick your toe in the deep water a little bit, or do you want to just jump in and swim? And when you give people what they think is a safe option, as opposed to thinking through something, you and I are trained to look at a situation, assess it, make a decision, go, and if we make a bad decision, make another one. Some of these people are trained to measure twice and cut once. But when you get to a voter that has to say, okay, well, this says this, and then what does this mean? This might mean this, and you'll have things all over the place, and you'll end up with a mess, I think. I don't think we can separate it once we've built the package. If we have to peel off any of it, we can peel off the residency requirements and listen to everybody say we didn't accomplish anything by adding 2 council members, because I think we've stacked it and we've spent a lot of time putting the moving parts together so that the car works and the boat floats. And then now if we start trying to take them apart and either this or this, then people won't read through those. They go, yeah, that's 2, that's 4, I think I'll vote for 2. That's my concern.
Short answer to your question, Toby. So, I think what you described, Toby, of the expanding 2 to 4 year terms and the term limits, bracketing that together makes sense. The 5 to 7 makes sense, but I think the key is how do you introduce the at-large and the geographic? To me, and maybe I'm just not seeing a way to do it, is it seems like that's, I'm not sure that you can do that separate. I mean, we could put that as an option and have three options, the 2 to 4 and the term limits as one, the 5 to 7 as a second one, but then how to introduce the district concept, I think is difficult. And I'm wondering, to Sandra's point, and I think you've said this a couple times, is there are people that acknowledge that parts of the community haven't been represented. Does this give them a reason to come into the fold and support this because they're getting something that they want, other people are getting something that they want? But I think we can break it apart. I'm just not sure how it would all work together. I think that was one of the concerns early on, was how do we do something so that if one thing passes and another thing doesn't, that it doesn't defeat the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I agree with that, and you're right. That's why I was asking if it was possible. But even if it's not, I think even if we take these 4 items and cut it in half and have one that's the term extension and term limits as a separate piece, so if it passes, which I would think it might, and the other piece doesn't pass, then we've just created term limits and extended terms for 5 people. Okay. And then the second part, which I'm with you, I don't think it's very easy to split, and we really don't want to. Then we have a second piece of that's the increase of the council tied to the residency requirement new system. So at least we've taken a 4-part and cut it into 2 parts.
Yeah, and I agree. I disagree with your analogy of a boat, because we're talking about good governance here, and all 4 pieces of those are not interrelated. You don't have to have staggered terms in order to have, you don't have to have 4-year staggered terms, and you don't have to have 7 council members, 6 plus the mayor. All those pieces make up something good, but you don't have to have one without the other. And I really feel that if one of those 4, it's just rolling the dice.
Well,
I feel like
staggered terms was so that we didn't have what we had with this council is the whole new council, and for them to get up to speed, it takes the first year.
Right, and
then now they're starting to get their mojo in, but now in a few months they're going to be.
And I think that's one of the most important things. The problem is, to get that accomplished, you have to agree with everything else. And if you don't agree with one thing, it all goes away. And I just feel like that's
What
just.
would you disagree with in there?
Oh, I don't disagree with anything in it.
Well,
I'm here on this. I hold the consensus
what
that
do you think people will disagree with the most?
anything. I don't want them to have 4-year terms. 4-year terms is too much. The geographical thing, are they talking about single member, I don't want to actually say the word, but SMDs? Is that what they're talking about here? Because I don't want that. That kind of seems like that to me. I don't want that. Just anything. You're really making, most people are making split-second decisions when they walk up because they didn't do the research. They didn't see the Facebook post. They didn't hear the radio show or whatever. I just feel like all the work that's been done to go over all these things. These are 4 separate items. There's not one. There's 4. And all the work that's been done, if you don't agree with one, it's like the recall thing. That is so simple. It's very, very cut and dry, easy. Everything else. So I'm just saying, I agree with Toby that even if it was split in half, maybe we don't have to make them 4, but it just seems like if there was a way to give people the option to vote on one or the other, we would still get some things accomplished versus just roll the dice and see if all citizens agree.
You can't separate it, though, because if you separate it, then it doesn't work. The purpose of this was staggered terms, increase the size of the council. You can't do 2-year terms and stagger them.
That's why you tie the 4-year term to the term limit, and if it passes, then it passes together, and it gets passed. I'm not I believe in everything we did, especially when I go back to the 50,000-foot level.
Don't kick this out
No,
the
no,
door.
no. Let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish. But as I read this in totality, the way this is going to be proposed in this proposition, and I know this isn't the final wording, I have anxiety. I think I agree with Toby and Michael about the anxiety of if somebody doesn't agree with 4-year terms but likes the residency thing, but they don't agree with 4-year terms, lost. And I think with the 4 different things, if you don't agree with one of them, if I'm looking at a menu in a restaurant and I see a steak, I love that. I see potatoes and I love that, and then I see asparagus, I'm not ordering it. I'm going to the next thing. I'm going to say no. That's probably a bad analogy, but I do hate asparagus.
Shut the asparagus off the plate.
But you can't here, though. You can't do that here, though.
Do that here, but I don't think you guys are giving the voters enough credit.
I don't.
You know,
I give a lot of voters credit.
There's two
I
things
give a lot of
believe.
voters credit, but I think there's a lot of voters that go out there and only educate themselves when they read that proposition on the ballot.
I'm not
Would y'all agree with that?
Uneducated. I'm saying that they may understand perfectly. They just don't agree with it.
Right.
That's the problem. There's no out. You can't just slide. You can't just slide up. Well, you can. You can split it up and give them the option to. I like the 4-year staggered terms and term limits. I like that, but I don't like the geographical area. So I will vote for that, but I'm not vote for that. So you can't.
You
just
can have
push,
one without the other.
Right. If you put it all in here like this, you can't just push it off the plate. I'm not getting that. I don't want that.
There are two things
I rest my
believe
case, sorry.
in. One is panhandle juries and panhandle voters, because they will get to the ballot box. If they're going to vote against something, they'll find some reason to vote against it. It may be the color paper it's printed on. If a panhandle jury is going to jury nullify, they'll say, bring the guilty bastard in and I'll give him a fair trial. But most people will look at something fairly, I think, for the whole, whether it's a panhandle jury or a panhandle voter. We had 21 amendments on one ballot. You know how many of them passed? 21.
Oh, when was that?
Was that 2013? 2013, I believe.
2013?
Yeah.
Because the last time this was tried was in
2020,
Yeah.
2020,
And it
right?
barely failed at that point. But we've
2021.
had as many as 21 amendments on the ballot, and every one of them passed. Now, you can't tell me that every voter agreed with every one of those. I will tell you that some people have the attitude, if the council has thought about this and worked on it, and they want it done, it's probably a good thing, so I'll vote for it.
If they trust the council.
Right.
Well, and I believe that they trust the council.
In splitting this, that gives us more chance, right? He, to his point, if we have one on there and everything's on there, and to both their points, you said if they don't like it, they're going to throw it out. You just pretty much said that. And he's saying, now we have chance. We've worked for 5 weeks of trying to put something together, and if they vote against one thing, not just our time, but I mean, that's wasted. If we have 2 on there, maybe they're going to like one of them. Like what Toby had said, maybe they're going to like this 4-year staggered. So at least we get something out of this, right? To their point, we're going to get nothing if they don't like it. If they don't like the asparagus. I mean that's kind of, it is all or nothing. I mean, it's the way it's written, it's all or nothing. So I mean, why could we not split it into 2?
Chair, may I suggest a compromise here? I really like Toby's idea of tying the term limit to the 2 to 4, particularly if you put the term limit language first on the ballot and then follow it up with the extension of the term. So that makes some sense to me. One measure for that. I find it, in terms of the 5 to 7 and the 3 residency, I think there's some reason to put them together in terms of strategy, because you're telling the voters you're going to have 3 residency areas, but you're also expanding the council by 2 while you're doing that at the same time. And that might sweeten the deal for some of the voters that wouldn't be inclined to be in favor of the residency. I think it's important again, the biggest thing for the public to understand in my mind as far as the residency requirements are concerned, I can't imagine any reasonable person looking at that heat map that we saw in terms of where our elected officials have come from, not just an anomaly over the past election cycle or 2, but for the past several decades, and think that constitutes good representative government at that table up there. And what that does is it tries to address that without going to the single-member district situation. And again, I guess there's some nuance there for people to understand and think about, and it may fall on a positive side to one person and a negative side to the other. That's really hard for us to sit and judge. But in terms of kind of trying to get us off dead center here with the number of propositions. And by the way, Brian, on the language in the measure itself that would appear on the ballot, do we have to put the districting process in there, or can that be something that can be done by ordinance?
It'll be done by ordinance.
Okay.
There's a lot of that.
And the sliding in, or the process to begin the stagger, does that have to be, that can be done in ordinance too?
By ordinance.
So that's scrubbing a lot of those words.
That's not amendment, that's draft that
Well,
you're looking at.
I understand, but it says proposed ballot measures. But simplifying, and I know we're not going to sit here and write the ballot language. That's not our job. But I think we could all agree that we want the simplest ballot language that we can get to, and we want to push as much of the extraneous stuff that doesn't have to be handled in the charter to an ordinance situation in order to execute the bigger things that we have done, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And that was the point I was making early on, was I can do that.
Okay.
I can make that happen. I can make the concept happen by just a simple ballot proposal that everyone will understand as to what the concept is, and then the rest of it we handle with an ordinance act.
Okay. So the simple ballot proposal would be, in terms of the election process, would be potentially tie the 2-year term limits to the 2 to 4, extending the terms to 4 years, and then maybe the 5 to 7 and the residency things together. Is there, what else am I missing that we need to do out of that box of stuff?
I
Anything?
think you got it.
That's
And
it.
we eliminated the Proposition B, right?
Yeah.
So we really are only back to 4 propositions at that point.
What do you think, Liz?
Is it?
You think that?
This is a good discussion.
Yeah, I mean-
It just gives us options.
I mean, this last piece right here that we're talking about, would that work for you? Would that be good?
Oh, I wouldn't necessarily saying the other wouldn't work. I was just saying if we get to the point, if we want to say maybe we need to, what's going to set it up to be most successful at the ballot? And I think that's, I think.
the council's going to have to be forthcoming.
Oh, I do, but.
I think it's great if you could show that map, because
Yeah.
then that kind of makes it look like you're behind this.
Right.
We want to change this.
Yeah.
We want more representation.
You want to be the good guys.
Trying to
You know,
make folk heroes out of you. Don't fight us.
Just as an aside, and don't take this for what it's worth, but if you took that heat map and you looked at voter turnout,
Well, we don't need to talk about that.
but I mean, I'm just saying, it's identical.
Well-
And I mean, while some people may say, wow, this is really a great thing, other people may say, well, wait a minute, I mean, it's just part of it when you look at but I think maybe separating these two things out would just, any way that you could, I guess, just gives you a chance to have half of something rather than all of nothing.
Yeah. I could make the argument, though, if I'm living on the east side or the southeast side or the northeast side, that, why should I bother to go vote? I don't have anybody to vote for that I even know. So, those things are connected. They are.
So,
Is it?
But no, I think it gives you, okay, here's the best case scenario. But, sometimes perfect is the enemy of good. And that's why I was just thinking, if you were to peel something off or do it a little bit differently, maybe not give it up, what would that look like? And I just think that gives council an option. Council may come back and say, no, we think it's better to have all of them up there. But I think just having an option to say, here may be a different way to do it, and just thinking which is the most politically expedient way to get something good accomplished so you're moving forward.
So would it be I was going to kind of recommend that. Is that too much of a cop-out for the committee to give them the option of combining those or separating them and let them make that decision? Is that too big of a cop-out for us?
We honestly can't give them anything but recommendations.
Right. So give them the recommendation and say you can either tie these two together or you can put them together.
Here it is,
and
boys,
let y'all
here's the
decide.
Tinker Toys, build something with it or not.
Yeah.
That's up to them.
Yeah, and Dean,
Gives you the latitude. Gives you the latitude to.
And I think just, when you come before council, just making, giving the same pros and cons and bringing things up, and you may think of new things to bring up even when just to kind of have a robust discussion to make sure that we've looked at, because we've got, Tom and I have been here, we're going to have a whole lot of ground to cover with the other council members. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure they're watching right now religiously.
I'm sure, yeah.
But
Either us or the debate right now.
Yeah, I think Don's in Cabo.
Yeah, they got YouTube running down there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, and two, I don't want us to cop out in terms of the council. They've given us a task, and I think we owe it to them to give it our best shot and let them do with it what they will. If I were on the council and I got a bunch of either-ors, I'm not going to feel like my committee helped me out very much because, we've been studying this for hours and hours and hours. Not to say that these guys won't, but they got other things to do. So it's like if we do a lot of either-ors or maybes and buts, then it puts them right back in the position of having to start from scratch,
I agree.
And I really don't think that's what they intended us to do.
So what do you recommend we do?
Give them just,
Those, well, I think we could split those two and get by with it. I hate to do that.
why don't we not recommend how they set the ballot? Since the council is the one that puts it on there, let's give them what we've got, and then if they think it's a problem, let them figure out how to split it. We hammered through this, and Dennis put this together, and I think it's a valid proposal. Now, we can get here to the 11th hour and 49th minute and go, well, maybe.
Is that what we look like?
Yeah, look, maybe we ought to take these little pieces apart, because our stupid voters are not going to care.
Sandra, your mic is off. Everybody's missing your little.
I have it off on purpose.
Okay, Dennis, so let's go back and see if we can do the dot voting exercise and see where we are.
Let me take a second back.
Okay.
So,
Oh, turn your mic on.
I'm sorry. As I look at it right now, I'm not sure we need the prioritization exercise depending on what we do, but right now, the way it's looking, the proposal as it is now is to have three measures: the recall, the council, and the city manager authority. If we do the other, we'd have four measures: the recall, the city manager authority, assuming that goes forward, and then two matters relative to council structure. Is that the way that you want us to present it to the council in the report? And if that's the consensus of the committee, I don't think we need to do the prioritization. Or do you? So I just would like to understand if you want to present it with two options or just how to proceed.
Well, what I'm hearing, Dennis, what I'm hearing the committee say is two options. That's what I'm hearing.
Is the way I summarized it, is that where people are comfortable? Is that accurate?
Is that right, committee?
When we're saying two options,
Yes, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yes.
Before
That's what
it.
we're talking about. Mhm.
right. 3 or 4.
Okay.
Yeah, so we couple the staggered terms going to 2 to 4 year with term limits. That would be A. The second one would be expanding to 7 members with the 1-3-3 format. So you introduce the districting concept.
Okay. I think that we're on the page, it seems like.
Okay.
Okay.
So I don't think we need
Don't
to
see any.
deal with dots.
No.
Are we
Which is a good thing,
recommending,
because I didn't want anybody to be double dotting, so.
I know these things say not in priority order, but order does matter when you list things on ballots. Only because I know there's people in Amarillo with a garage full of vote against Proposition A signs because they put them up every year no matter what the proposition is. So my recommendation is to list the most likely to pass proposition as Prop A. And I think it's the way you have it listed here, the recall. That's just my theory.
So let me check for consensus of the committee. So we did that. A is recall. B and C would be the staggered terms and the 5 to 7, and D would be the council, the city manager authority. Is that in that order?
Okay.
See, we got from Beverly told you knows how to negotiate with bosses.
One thing, tell me, are those salaries in the charter correct?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. You know, our charter reads like it's just not there, so they're not correct. Let's keep posting it.
Okay, Dennis, where are we?
I think that there's a lot of things that we touched on early on about cleaning up for archaic language. That may be something as a recommendation, as a follow-up, to take a look at that down the road.
Okay. Okay, Dennis, so where are we? So we're down to committee bike rack items, and I think this is probably going to falls under the topic we were just talking about, which is update charter to remove, replace archaic language and provisions, and then change update charter to be consistent with the state law, particularly regarding annexation, purchasing, et cetera. And so that just goes right along with the charter review process and the continuation of working on the governance and ends policies. So with that, I will accept additional comments from the committee.
Well, Madam Chair, I would like to thank the council and these two gentlemen for having appointed us to this.
Absolutely.
And given, we hear a lot about, well, if they would just do this or if they would just do that. It's only with folks that are willing to come around the table and do some of that they stuff that good things happen. So thank you all for asking us to do this. Dennis, thank you for keeping us semi-generally squared and moving forward. I think the product is a good product, and I've enjoyed working with all of you guys.
Yes, and as chair, my main goal was to make sure that I did a lot of listening and I wanted to make sure that everybody's voice on this committee was heard, and you got to express your concerns and any issues that you had or whatever you thought a citizen was telling you. I wanted to make sure you had a safe space to put that on the table. So, thank you. I appreciate that.
Madam Chair, before we adjourn, can I address one housekeeping matter? Instead of the July 9th City Council meeting, leadership of this committee and council has talked about doing a special meeting so that we can give this topic full attention. And I just wanted to get consensus, maybe by show of hands, who would be available on July 11th for a meeting.
My dance card's empty.
The 10th. We do, yeah. The other date we were looking at was possibly the 15th. So what I might do, because I'm still working with council as well, let me send out some dates to everybody and just query some additional dates. We'll extend it from what we originally looked at, maybe. So I'll follow up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
All y'all for your hard work. This has been an excellent, excellent committee. I mean, I've heard more here and learned a lot, and y'all did tremendous. Thank you. From the bottom, I mean, everybody, thank y'all very much. Did a great job.
Yeah, just to echo what Gary said, we appreciate the opportunity to help and to be able to make some good recommendations. And again, I just appreciate everyone. You know, you guys were just so respectful of each other. We could interject sense of humor, and humor is always good as long as we're getting the job done. So thank you all. I really appreciate it very much.
Madam Chair.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a great pleasure working with you. There's so much wisdom and knowledge at this table. I think the process really benefited from each of you, your perspectives and your experience, and I look forward to presenting to the council in the next few weeks. Thank you.